Elliot, a civil engineer, is appointed as part of the professional team on a turnkey project for the design and construction of a large commercial and office complex. The layout of the upper floors of the complex changes, and it is when the formwork for the upper floors is stripped, it is found that there are cracks in the horizontal slabs and the column heads in the lower floors. Investigations reveal that there's an error on the design of the reinforced concrete in the lower floors. What to do now? Welcome to episode 3 of Ensuring Trust with Leppard, a podcast where we share the stories behind the Leppard underwriting team, who are in the business of protecting your reputation. In each episode, we speak to members of the team, hearing stories of how they've ensured trust and helped protect reputations since 1991. Now, if you're a contractor, engineer, or in the construction sector, you want to listen closely to this one. In this episode, we're talking about single project PI, the type of insurance that covers engineers such as Elliot, subcontractors, principals, contractors, and in certain instances, developers. With us from the Leppard team are Keith Mumford, Head of Single Projects. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
And Steve von Roretz, Chair of Leppard.
Thank you. Good morning.
Keith, let's kick off with you. You're a qualified civil engineer, but have been involved in construction insurance and then later on the construction liability market. So I figure this type of insurance is like second nature to you. Drawing from your own personal experience, how essential is single project PI?
As far as a developer is concerned or a financier, it has become almost imperative to take out single project PI to protect not only the financiers and developers' interests, but in fact anybody who's involved with the project.
So let's toggle back to the story of Elliot. How commonplace is a story like this? I mean, how many real-world Elliots are protected against a risk of this nature?
Well, most Elliots as engineers should have their own PI policy. However, in a case like this, an individual's PI policy might not respond fast enough to the problem, and the developer might end up with having to pay for the rectification of his work himself if there's not a single project PI policy in place. If there's a single project PI policy in place, such as we've got at Leppard, which we call a rectification policy, it would step in immediately and rectify the problem so the project's not delayed.
So, Steve, the single project PI is quite a niche product, a response to a very specific customer need. What is it about this product that sets it apart?
So if I go back a little bit of time, Leppard Underwriting didn't write single project policies.
Oh.
We only started this a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And the reason we only started a couple of years ago was we needed a skill set that understood this space. And that's where Keith got involved. He has a long history with us in different guises, but he had nothing else to do, basically. So we thought it would be a good idea.
How generous of you.
But we had been looking at this for quite a long while. In fact, internally, we'd already developed our own rating methods and a policy wording. And when we contracted with Keith, we found there's a lot of synergy. So that was quite an interesting thing. And you referenced passion. That is exactly what we were doing. I'd be worried about the individual growth and development of Keith because I think he's probably got a few years under his belt. But when we look at single project as a niche product, it is very distinctly different to the general built environment PI policy, which is underwritten, as Keith has mentioned, on an annual policy basis. This policy and the core of this policy, and Keith referenced it just now, is about being involved with the developer, the financier, the contractors, the engineers, the architects, the quantity surveyors,
The whole value chain.
The whole value chain in relation to professional acts that are performed negligently and cause a problem. And the idea of the policy, the core idea of the policy, is to get involved and fix things up before you have to fight about who's liable for it. Therefore, everybody's involved. That distinguishes this policy from an annual policy where Everybody goes to their corners, they have their lawyers involved, and everybody tries to defend against their liability. And the poor old developer or owner has to fight and prove liability. All we have to do here is saying, has there been a professional act that has caused the problem? Fix it. So you're actually contributing to the project running smoothly, and hopefully a project that delivered without problems post-handover.
Okay. Now, we've been told there's something called the Leppard touch. What's that about?
That really comes back to our core ethic of understanding the customer needs. And I referenced the fact we didn't do this business up until 2 years ago. That touch is about making sure we fully and absolutely understand what the customer requirements are in this area, what the project is about, where it is located, the environmental impacts, the social issues involved, who's doing the work, who are the professionals, their track record. And that, I think, is part of our Leppard touch. If we get those elements right and we've understood it correctly, there should be no problems with the policy performance at a future date. We're taking this, as we speak today, we're taking one step further, expanding out what Keith is able to do to a team of people, project managed, where the person would look for lawyers' input, for accountants' input, maybe other engineers' input, create a group of people that will look at the project and review it almost like an audit. And the output ultimately would be a document that could be shared with the developer and the financiers and the owners of the project that hopefully adds value. It's not just pay premium and hope nothing happens. We hope to be able to contribute to the performance and the efficacy of the product by doing exactly that at our expense. And I think that connects to our general theme and ethos of having a Leppard touch and how we build a product, once again, on a plain language basis. It is unique in the market.
So I guess it's a form of hyper due diligence then, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, Keith has got a lot of experience in here. Brokers and the customers fill out these forms. And many years ago, the form was just like, here's the name of the project and the size of it and a few people involved. But it's a great deal more than that. If we're contributing to the success of a project, it's critical that we do so properly. And the application form is just a confirmation of some information. It's the depth of information behind it, timescales, as I said earlier, all the elements of a project, and make sure that we've reviewed it, understood it, and the product that we offer ultimately is a contribution to the quality of the project.
So in the spirit of doing things properly, what's your advice to your brokers on this product?
Don't do it. Don't get involved in single project PR covers if you do not have deep experience in the construction and built environment space. This is not something that youngsters, with respect to youngsters, should get involved in. You need a lot of experience and understanding of the moving parts of a project and the professionals involved and who's doing what to whom. This is danger space if they get it wrong for a broker. They've got to have the experience. Only experienced people should do it.
Now, Keith, you've underwritten several projects in the built environment. Without breaching confidentiality, tell us a bit more about some of these projects.
Well, one of the very first and most interesting ones was regard to what we call a post-tension slab. It was a small shopping centre, relatively small shopping centre because there was only one major tenant, and that was Pick n Pay. And it was due to be complete for Christmas shopping. Shortly after the deck was stripped, it was found that there were cracks around some of the column heads. And an investigation revealed that the design engineer who was utilized by the contractor who erected the slab had made an error in the design of the reinforcing around the column heads. This could have been a disaster because it could have meant that Pick and Pay wouldn't open on time because vehicles couldn't travel over it. So we stepped in and immediately recognizing that it was the engineer's fault, we commissioned temporary structures to be erected around the column heads to hold up the slab during the Christmas period and post-Christmas period. And then after that, we went back and put a permanent remedial solution in to support the slab. And we went from having a very, very dissatisfied developer and a very, very dissatisfied Pick and Pay to two people that couldn't help us enough. And that was using as the Leppard touch of a rectification policy. Don't fight with everybody, just fix the problem. Another one was single project policy that was issued to a well-known contractor whose name shall go unmentioned for some very, very big conveyor belt structures at Kusile Power Station. And when they started to try and erect the trestles that hold up the structures, these things started to fall over. And they notified of a potential claim, and we appointed, or the underwriters appointed, some specialist engineers who, unbeknown to us at the time, were dealing with a similar problem at Medupi Power Station. And they took one look at these and they said, no, these designs are impossible, they're not going to work. And we actually offered their services to the contractor, and they said, no, they'll get their German counterparts involved, which they did, and they brought the redesigns, and we said, they're not going to work either. So eventually we assisted them to rectify their design. If they hadn't had our input, I'm not sure they would have ever finished those contracts. And there was another one. We had to step in because we could see consequential, we could see delay costs arising because the contract wasn't going to be finished, and we might have to pay those delay costs.
Sure.
So we had to get out as fast as possible.
And I like the emphasis on no use complaining about something, just get the work done.
Get it done.
And just focusing on that.
And we were very proud that we were actually able to assist them and fix the problem. This last one is a very, very interesting one, and I don't think my colleague Steve even knows about it.
Oh.
Goes back many years when Murray and Roberts owned a company in Cape Town called Consani Engineering, and they were the second biggest tank manufacturers, tank container manufacturers in the world. And their standard tank was 20,000 litres. And they decided they're going to go up to 30,000 litres. And they're going to build 4,000 of these tanks, and they started selling them around the world. And they were snapped up. So the production line, off they went, and they started sending out these tank containers around the world, and the word started to come back, they're failing, they're cracking. They started investigation, they discovered that their design department actually underread what we call the bending moment in the tank once it's full. So now they sat with the underwriters here in South Africa, sat with a problem. They had 4,000 of these tank containers floating around the world, some of them carrying noxious liquids. What do they do about it? And we all came up with a very interesting solution. We manufactured 400 what we call courtesy tanks, correctly designed this time. And these were then taken to their clients all around the world and said, here's 100 tanks for you. You can use them while we take your tanks away, and we'll go and fix them, and then we'll give them to you back, and you give us our courtesy tanks back. At the end of the day, the underwriters sold those 400 courtesy tanks and made back about 50% of the cost of the claim. So there was no argument, there was only cooperation, and everybody came out smiling, more or less.
I think that really speaks to having to understand that whatever you're insuring, you need to be aware of all the moving parts, what Steve mentioned earlier. So before we wrap up, what being maybe on top of mind as we've been talking, is there anything perhaps that you think either a client or a broker or just that is something that's been in the back of your mind for a while that you want to share?
I think from my point of view is that now we've got involved in this space. We always had the ambition to do it.
Yeah.
But when you get to these larger building projects, built environment projects, it has become, I think, really important to make sure that the financiers and the developers understand that they need to contract with whoever they contract with, not in typical legal language that sets you apart. And from the day one, it almost starts with a litigious nature.
Yeah.
I'm over here, you're over there. They need to have a cooperation agreement, a partnering agreement almost, and reflected in those contracts that says, we're in this together. Our reputations are involved. Let's do things. If things go wrong, let's fix it up, as opposed to everybody running to their corners, taking out the legal contracts and suing each other.
Yeah.
The only person that gets rich there is a lawyer.
Yeah.
and they're rich enough already. Sorry to those lawyers who are customers. It's so important. It really is.
I can only reiterate what Steve said. It is essential to understand the contracts, and it's essential to understand the insurance contract or policy. And we as Leppard are going to be able to provide them with a measure of, by the investigation and the information we will produce, the financiers and developers will be able to take that into account, I believe, when they're forming their contracts. I sincerely hope they'll look at it like that.
I mean, if you go back to Keith's example of where the design and the trestles weren't working, I would hope, and we're not doing the design, obviously, but there is at least a basic review of things. And if we've got the right personnel in play, maybe that would never have occurred. Never have occurred.
Yeah, correct.
The customer may have had to pay more because for a better design. But guess what? That's so cheap compared with the delays and things that could go wrong and the collapse, God forbid. So I think that's our future generation of writing this business is exactly that. So we've helped the design of those trestles.
Future-proofing.
It's future-proofing.
Yeah.
Insurance aside, I mean, you'll still need the insurance in case there's a catastrophe.
Anything can happen,
Yes.
But that's fine.
So we're not going to take over the role of the engineers.
Yeah.
No, that's not our job. But we can give an audit, a review, a due diligence, I think you mentioned. Is exactly that. That the end result of that project is a good built environment project.
Gentlemen, this has been educational. I'm sure it is for our listeners as well. Thank you for listening to this episode of Insuring Trust with Leppard. To listen to previous episodes, check out the social media channels on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook under Leppard Underwriting, and on Twitter at Leppard_writing. To find out more about Leppard products or to get support as a broker, visit leppard.co.za. Till we meet again, make sure your reputation is protected.